Hello and welcome back to the Honest Business Podcast. I hope you are very well. Today we have an exciting episode. It is our annual International Women's Day episode, and this will be airing just before International Women's Day. And I really hope that you utilize this episode, share it with your network. We want as many people as possible to listen to this episode because I believe it's a really, really important one. We started this last year. If you go back to episode 50 of the Honest Business Podcast, I did an episode on the glass ceiling of communication, which I still believe is such an important topic and such a topic that people need to listen to. And these two episodes go nicely together. So maybe you want a refresher, or maybe you haven't listened to that episode, please go back and listen to episode 50 because they both kind of pair well together of what we're going to discuss today. Today we are discussing about what type of leader do you want to be. We're going to talk about leadership styles, something that's hugely important. So if you're a avid listener of the podcast, you will know that I don't do long introductions. I like to get straight into things. I will keep the episode as short and sweet as possible. But if you are new, welcome and thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoy and this becomes part of your regular podcast listen. So happy International Women's Day, if no one said that to you. It's always a prominent day in the calendar, a one that is frustrating and joyous in sort of part equal measures. And it can be a time for us to really think about who do we want to be as women and the change that we want to create in the world. I'm not going to talk too much about the thoughts around International Women's Day as a whole. I'm more interested in talking about our topic for today. But I have chosen this episode because leadership is something that the world is lacking now more than ever. The world needs, we need more female leaders. You listening to this are most likely a leader yourself. And therefore, this is really important for us to get right. What I'm not going to talk about today is we're not going to go masses into leadership theory and leadership style theory. So if you are someone who's studied that, maybe at university or as part of a qualification, that's not really what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk more about the practicality side of things and exploring a conversation to let you kind of think bigger and dream. But if you are interested in learning about leadership styles, which I highly suggest you do, there are tons and tons and tons of free resources available, different models that various academics and professionals have proposed over the years, and they all have something really useful to offer. So I'd highly suggest you go off and do some research, into Goldman or various different, I'm trying to think about the various different, there's sort of 4 or 5 key prominent players in leadership style theory. But I believe that as the world is moving forward, the theory is less so relevant and more the application is what's really important. So first up, most people don't think of themselves as a leader. So today you might be tuning into this and you might be thinking, I'm not really sure why I'm listening because I'm not a leader. I want to encourage you to think about the fact that you probably are a leader. And a leader does not have to mean that you lead a team. A leader does not have to be a certain image that you have in your head. I'm not going to go through the list of questions, but some of you might have done this exercise before where you can go through a series of questions in your head to really identify bias that we all have, unconscious bias, conscious bias, explicit bias, of what do we think a leader should be? What do we think a leader looks like? What do we think a leader ought to behave like? And what I want to encourage you to do is that we can remove all of those thoughts, those reservations, those preempt pictures of leadership in our heads, because a lot of people don't want to be a leader because of the leadership they've seen play out in their lives. And what I want to encourage you to say is that is not necessarily leadership. It's not necessarily good leadership, and it's not necessarily the leader that you want to be. And today's episode is about you exploring what type of leader would you like to be? The people that are going to make the biggest amount of change in this world and impact the world are the people that lead. And I don't mean that you have to leave some kind of like movement. I just mean that you can impact people on a daily basis with how you show up in the world, how you talk, how you hold yourself, how you're kind to others, how you speak to other people. That is infectious and that is powerful. And we need more role models and we need more leaders more than ever. So I really would encourage you, especially at this International Women's Day of 2024, to encourage yourself to be, say it to yourself and give yourself permission to say, I can be a leader and I am a leader and I feel comfortable in owning the space that I am a leader in. So today's episode is more of a plea than anything to say, please step up to be the leader that you know you want to be. allow yourself to be that. I meet a lot of women who internally they know they make a really good leader. They know they're destined to be a leader at some point in their lives. But because of whatever circumstance they're in, because of whatever job experience they've had, from whatever really bad manager they've had, that gets pushed and pushed and pushed to the wayside for a long, long time. And they can end up in situations where they feel like leadership is not an option for them, that leadership isn't for people who are like them. And I want to really encourage you to allow yourself to become the leader that you want, maybe the leader that you've never had. The joy of this, though, is that you get to define what leadership means to you. You get to define what a leader is. You get to define what your version of leadership is. And I want you to just take some time today with me to get a pen and paper out, or get a digital notebook, something out, and make some notes, make some thoughts, draw. If you're a visual learner, doodle maybe, but explore what leadership means to you. Explore what you want that definition to mean. I'd love for you to really get clear on who are some really prominent people in your life. Maybe you know them personally, maybe you don't, maybe you look at them from afar, maybe they're a role model. Who do you enjoy viewing their leadership? Who feels like a leader that you'd like to be? Who feels very accessible? They don't have to feel accessible, but I think a lot of people are pulled to leaders that feel accessible, that feel real, that feel honest, that feel fair. I do work with various leaders on their leadership styles, but we had at the start of the year a group program that I run, and we discussed this briefly for about 5-10 minutes around what sort of leadership did they want to be in 2024. And there were some beautiful responses, some really, really nice responses. And it was a great 5-10 minutes to just get people thinking and get people to explore actually what do they want their leadership to look like. And what I think is really interesting is how similar a lot of people's leaderships were. Now, there's not a huge, there's not thousands of people, but in this room we had women who are business leaders from loads of different industries, like a lot of different industries, and they all came with a similar set of characteristics, of traits, of behaviors, of kind of where they would want to be as a leader, what they want to deliver, what they want people to feel when they themselves are leading. And I think that's really important. And also remembering that you are a role model to the people in your life. I'm not talking about your professional life. I'm saying like your personal life, people that you come in contact with day to day. You are a role model because the world needs more role models. And I'm sure if you have children, you will really feel that heavily of that gap that is there at the moment, and that constantly trying to find people that your children can model and can look up to and can you feel really inspired by. But I also want to remind you guys that you yourself are an incredible role model. And some of you listening to this podcast, maybe you listening right now, you specifically, are doing things that is massively progressive, that is massively game changing. It's hugely going to change the people around you's lives. Maybe it's people external from your life that it's going to change, your stakeholders, your clients. You are doing really positive work in the world, but nobody really turns around and tells you that. They're not very often going to get someone patting you on the back and saying, well done, like, this is amazing and you've done so well, because it's not really how the world is set up, and it doesn't really work like that. Hopefully you have a coach or someone who can tell you that and say, well done. But, we don't live in a society where people say, thanks for being my role model, or that's really inspiring to me, thank you. I try and make an effort to say that to people more, and I hope that you maybe would adopt that too, of trying to share people when they do good work, and if it does inspire you, or it is really their leadership is really useful, to say thank you for being X, Y, and Z, because that's really helpful for me. So you thinking about role models and not seeing that as a pressure. It doesn't need to be this heavy thing of like, oh, I've got to be a role model and that means I've got to be perfect. Nothing is about perfection. Whenever I get people to do an exercise around leadership styles and who they want to be and how they want to approach leadership, perfection doesn't come up, right? Perfection is not what we're actually looking for. And I think as human beings, that's not what we're seeking. We're seeking connection. We're seeking understanding. We're seeking community. we're seeking fairness. Fairness is a word that comes up a lot when I do this kind of exercise with people. Fairness, honesty. Also, I think what's an interesting one is authority often comes up. So, authoritative but fair is something that happens. And I think the reason that's interesting is that what people are actually saying there is they want to be clear in their communication. And that is definitely a theme that comes up, especially with leaders who haven't, this is new to them. If they, are managing a team, maybe you've got 15, 20 people, 30 people in a team, or maybe you have got a very small team, but you're in a position where you're like, you have a lot of other people who you're leading. And you're thinking, what do I want people to get from me? Because ultimately, leadership is about us inspiring others. And I don't mean that in terms of you've got to have some kind of inspirational story. It's about other people feeling like I can do this too, or I am actually going to do X, Y, and Z thing, or I can hit my goal. Because when you're managing teams, we've really got to remember that the core comes down to how do we motivate people? Now, that's not me saying that your sole job is to motivate, because if you look at motivation theory, that's never going to work if you try and just purposely go and motivate individuals. But part of your job is helping people feel like, yes, this is applicable to me. Yes, I am allowed to do this. Yes, I can take up space. Yes, I can actually move forward with X, Y, and Z thing. And so you remembering that you're a role model is hugely important. So let's just talk about different types of leadership that you could decide to adopt, because maybe you're sat there thinking, well, I don't even know what sort of leadership, apart from being like fair and kind of a reasonable leader, you might be thinking, I don't really know what sort of leader I do want to be. So let's just think about, do you want to be a leader who tells people what the story is, what the rules are, if you want to use the word rules, what boundaries are, and that's it, you let people go off and do their own thing? Are you someone who wants to have a lot of autonomy over people? Do you enjoy power? And I just want to preface this by saying I'm trying to explain these without any kind of emotional connection or bias, because it's very important that we are able to have terms in the world that don't carry huge condescending kind of mimicking behaviors of certain previous experiences that you don't like. So when I'm saying, do you like power? That in your head might think, oh God, I can't like power because that's really bad and that's really not a good thing. And I agree with you to some degree. Like, not necessarily saying that you need to go and like seek out all power, but that has only been coined a negative emotion and a negative term for you and for me listening because of previous experience that we've seen. So it might be that actually you do enjoy having power, but your definition of power is something very different. Also, something that's really important is that how you communicate what your leadership style is and what your leadership style actually is and your actions can be two different things. And the reason I say that is because when you're creating your leadership style, that's something that you're doing as a personal endeavor project, something that you're looking at. When you're communicating your leadership style, if you need to, some of you won't need to communicate your leadership style. Some of you, especially if you're managing a team, you really do. You need to help people understand, how are you behaving? How do you want to be as a leader? And what do they expect from you? Yada, 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 vice versa. But when you're describing that, you're not necessarily going to explain the same things that you've wrote down on a piece of paper. Some of you might. It depends on who you're managing. It depends on the emotional intelligence of the people. It depends on where they're at in their journey, what they do. If you're managing a team of leaders underneath you, then potentially, yes, you will say the same thing. But for some people, they're managing people where actually it makes zero sense to explain that, or they would not say the same wording as they will use when they're describing that. Let's go back to another few things. It might be that you're quite a strategic leader. You might really understand the kind of high level stuff, and you're really trying to help people also come on that journey with you and see how things fit together and what role things play with one another. And I think that you'll get a clear understanding of what your typical leadership style is, what your natural leadership style is. You'll probably fall into a kind of way of leading. And then you might have a separate column, maybe on your sheet of paper, that is what you actually want to be. Now, what I would say is it's very rare that your natural leadership style is wrong. It's not that you need to, completely tear it apart, because often people are naturally really quite good leaders sometimes. And often it's little tweaks. So spend some time writing down how you show up as a leader currently. What are your typical leadership go tos? What is the language you tend to use? What's the approach you tend to use? Are you someone who puts off having a difficult conversation? Or is your leadership style direct and very kind of helping people to nurture them and be kind to them? And when I say being kind, what I mean is like having a difficult conversation is the kind thing to do. Having that in a prompt time frame, being really direct with people, not kind of pussyfooting around the issue, and instead saying exactly what you need to say is really important. When leadership goes wrong is when people aren't clear on what they're trying to communicate most of the time. Most of the time, it's like people don't want to hurt someone's feelings. So let's just have an example, right? Let's just say that you have to have a conversation with someone at work about a really difficult topic and you don't really want to have it with them. Maybe it's a sensitive issue. The kind thing for you to do is to go and have that really difficult conversation in a prompt way, in a space that is appropriate, in a time frame that's appropriate, yada, yada, yada. But you actually get into the nitty gritty of that conversation, not fluffing it up, not having like loads of different things attached to it, not making it really difficult for people to understand. You just going in and saying straight what needs to be said. That is a kind thing to do, because what's really not kind is when people try and cover all these different things up in the message that they're trying to send. And then it makes the person on the receiving end find it really difficult to figure out what it is that you're trying to say to them. And so I'd really encourage you to switch potentially. Some of you will already be at this point, but some of you might need to switch how you look at having difficult conversations. How do you manage conflict? How do you deal with this idea that ultimately you are a manager for people potentially, or you are a boss? And sometimes we have, so with clients, one-on-one clients, we work with this a lot, and we work through team issues and things that come up within teams. And I work with really lovely women who they believe, in not necessarily having this massive hierarchical business, and they want to work with others and they want their employees to feel like part of a movement. And sometimes what that then means is they really struggle with the more authoritative types of conversations where they need to put something in place, they need to put a boundary in place, or somebody has done something that's overstepped a policy and therefore they need to address it. They really struggle with that. But you have to remember that, like, you're choosing to be in business, you're choosing to be a manager or a leader. At some point you have to do the stuff that feels really out of your depth. Is there things you can do in your business to change that? 100%. Like, yes, you can hire managers, yes, you can hire a CEO potentially if that's not something you enjoy doing. But you need to really accept this idea and get good at having these difficult conversations. Let's think about another leadership piece. So another leadership piece might be you're a transformational leader. Maybe you're all about pouring into others. You really want to help them go on a different journey. You really want to inspire people, and you really want to see where people can go. Maybe it's that you had a really fabulous manager or a really fabulous leader in your life early in your career. Maybe you just know that a teacher potentially, that is how much of an impact that they had on you, and therefore you really want to pass that forward. And that can be totally part of your leadership. And hopefully what you will find is, as you become more aware of who do you want to be as a leader, I find that the best leaders will merge different leadership styles together, and they will create something that is a combination of their personality and who they are as an individual, plus their leadership style, to create a really powerful way of showing up in the world. I also would really recommend that you think about this idea that if you are a leader for people, if you're a people manager, if you're someone who is leading employees within your business, coaching is a huge part of your role. You will spend a lot of time coaching individuals through their own journey, through their goals. What do they want? Personal development plans are so important. And I'm trying not to get too in the depths of like day to day, because I want this episode to be bigger picture in terms of like, who do you want to be as a leader? But just thinking about like, coaching is a big part of your role. Helping people find, like, they come to you with a problem, you're essentially coaching them through to find a solution. Because often you want autonomous team members, you want people who come with solutions, not problems. And so you want someone potentially who comes with, here's the problem, here's 2 or 3 solutions that we can deal with it, which one do you want to go with? But in order for you to get to that, for a lot of people, you're going to spend some time really coaching people through how they make decisions and how they show up in the world and how they feel about building confidence in themselves. Often a lot of the coaching stuff you will do is about confidence building. It's about them understanding kind of where do they sit within an organization, or where do they sit within an industry, and managing the to and fro-ing of that. I think another thing for you to get to think about is, are you a real visionary leader? Sometimes that is so attractive to people, and some of the best leaders are the people who can really vision forward more than they can in the future. And I think that's a sort of one where I think some people have it or they don't. And I'm not saying you can't cultivate that, you definitely can. But I have definitely found that some people are just very naturally good at visioning forward and bringing people along with them and really selling people into that and selling them into the journey. And then you've also got others, especially if you've got like co-founders, you tend to find, I think, that one person's particularly good at sort of visionary stuff, and one person can be really good at the more kind of strategic or transformational or transactional stuff, where it's really, and paired together as a really lovely combination. Another thing for you to think about is, do you want to be more of a strong leader? And what I mean by that is just in terms of how people listen to you. Sometimes we do have, I do have clients who will say, I feel like no one takes me seriously. I feel like nobody's actually listening to what I say. I feel like I don't really get the respect that I deserve. I'm the director of the business. I'm responsible for employing these people, but they don't seem to care about what I'm saying. And this is where I think actually it's really important for you to not just want to adopt the kind of easygoing, more fluffier, I don't know if that's the right term, leadership styles that when you look into leadership styles will spring out to you. So like the visionary piece is often an exciting one. Sometimes the transformational one is. Like often people get pulled to the ones that are more lighter, more fluffier, more less conflict. It often comes down to conflict management, and conflict is just like, But ultimately, in order for you, again, it comes back to what we're talking about being kind. It's like, for you to come back to who you are meant to be and how you can be a good leader, I will argue that part of that comes down to how can you hold yourself? How can you assert yourself so that others really take you seriously? And that is something that you will play a dance with, okay? It's not that you're going to get it right. It's not that it's going to be a one set thing and then that's it sorted forever. You will probably always go back and forth on, am I being authoritative enough or am I not? Or am I being assertive enough? Or am I being clear enough in my communication? But you having a shift in your perspective on what it means to be a direct authoritative leader is something that I think can help a lot of people. Because as entrepreneurs, often people didn't get into business to be a leader. They didn't get into business to be a manager. And therefore, when that is a whole other job role on top of their idea of being an entrepreneur, that can be really difficult for people. And what often happens is they then run away because, they might have started a business because they had a really crap, horrendous experience in corporate. So therefore, they're so conscious of that, they want to be the opposite of whatever that person was. And whilst I'm not saying that they shouldn't be that, I'm saying that there will be parts of leadership that you really have to alter your opinion on, rewrite your discord about, really change how you look at something, and go and seek out models of leadership and styles of leadership that you like. And that's one of the pieces I really would urge you to do. Spend some time going and looking at different people and how they show up and which ones of those you enjoy. Because I would argue that some of the people you really enjoy their leadership from are assertive. They are all of the things, the list of things where sometimes people might put them in a bad light, or they might say, you don't really want to be X, Y, and Z. Bureaucratic. Do you want to be bureaucratic? Well, some people will say yes, some people will say no. Situational leadership. That's the one where people are like, is that going to work for me? Is it not? How does that feel? Like, I want you to think about, who do you admire? And then start to depict what you believe their leadership styles to be. What's really fascinating is to hear someone, well, this has happened to me semi-regularly, where someone will say, I really enjoy the way you lead. I really like your leadership style. You're an inspiring leader, for example. And that's really lovely to hear. But what's really interesting is then if I say, okay, great, what is it about, because I'm trying to help them get to what their leadership style is. I say, what is it about my leadership that you like? And once they start lifting that off, it's really interesting to see, what is it that I align with, but what is it that they get that I actually didn't realize, or wasn't on purpose, or I didn't think that it was. And again, just to provide some more anecdotal evidence to support this idea that it is okay to be really direct, or to be really straight, or to have strong boundaries, or to say what it is that you need to say, most of the time, not that I get it a lot, but whenever someone says that about my leadership, they always say some kind of thing of, I like that you're direct, or you don't put up with any shit, or you're really clear, or you're very kind and fair, and you're very gracious in terms of your time, but you're also really strong in what you need for yourself and standing up for yourself. And that, I think, should be really motivational to you if you're listening to this episode and you know that your leadership needs to grow and your leadership style maybe needs to just be a bit bigger. Maybe your leadership has been quite small and quite internal because you're still kind of working through it. And now you're like, okay, I think I just need to be bolder with this. Like, I need to give it a bit more oomph and a bit more welly. I'd really encourage you to go with that and be like, yeah, actually, I do need to do this. Also, think about the other people in your life and ask other people in your life. I'm not saying take this and like, therefore, don't use whatever they say and that be kind of right or wrong, but having a conversation with people in your life and saying like, what do you think I am as a leader? What sort of leadership style do you think that I show day to day? And it can be really interesting for people to communicate with you about that. And for you to not judge that. It's not about judging what the other person feels, because how they feel is how they feel. It's about, how do you feel about the response that they give? And does that feel aligned with you? We could talk about this for a long time. It's such an in-depth and interesting topic. But I really hope, and we've only like tiny scratched the surface today, but I really want to encourage you to take today and some time to just think about, what type of leader do you want to be? And is it time for you to step up a bit more? Is it time to crank it up? Maybe you've been going for a couple of years and you're like, do you know what, actually, I have got permission to be a leader. I do know what I'm saying. I do have something to share with the world. Again, this is not about perfection. It's not about us being these like invincible human beings. It's about us being humans. It's about us making mistakes. It's about us failing. It's about being open. It's about honesty. It's about sharing a connection with someone. And we cannot underestimate in the world how powerful that is, particularly as women, as we're trying to progress and we're trying to, we need more leaders in the world, full stop. But we also need more female leaders in the world. We need more women. Like, get more women in these leadership positions where they can actually start advocating for change. And you are one of them. You are 100% one of them. And if you run your own business, you have so much power and influence over all of your various stakeholders that you can impact through your leadership. I want to thank you for listening today. I hope that this has sparked some thoughts. Please come and share with me. I'm over on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. @May.James_ is how to find me on Instagram. My links are in the show notes. But please come and talk to me about, what has this episode sprung up for you today? Have you kind of just had a light bulb where you're like, do you know what? Yeah, I just need to go for this. I need to be bigger. Are you then going to go and learn more about leadership styles? Are you going to learn about leadership theory? Are you going to kind of dive further and look at, what does this mean for you? But really, I would encourage you, don't get bogged down in the theory part so much. Think about the application and think about what that means for you day to day and how that can impact your team positively. It's such an important area of, your personal development, and it is something that will be ever growing. You know, leadership work is never done, it is never complete, it is a constant progression. We are all on this journey of trying to improve ourselves. This isn't something that you will ever become just a pro and then that's it, we're done. We all make mistakes in it, but we all, I would say, if you're listening to this podcast, we all have a real desire to do really good work in the world and to show up and to impact people positively. And therefore, if that is your intention, you will make that happen, providing you're happy to be self-aware and to be corrected when you're wrong and to keep going even when you're thinking, I don't even know if I'm doing the right thing here. Have a fabulous day. Have a fabulous International Women's Day. Please, please, please share this episode, talk about this episode, do an episode in response to this. I don't know, talk about it. I think it's really important to raise the conversation around leadership, especially for women, as we take on more of the world. So take care, and I will speak to you soon. Bye.